Hello everyone, my name is Sophia and I'm joined by my partner Salwa.
Hello.
And we are going to be presenting part one of the databases project today. So where we will begin is control-servlet.java, and I'll just show you how our project as a whole works. So I will run just the entire project on our server. And as you can see, it goes to this page, which is our default. And if we look in our default case down here, it goes to homepage.jsp. So if I go down to my web content folder and I go into homepage.jsp, we can see that there is a jokes management application title, which is up here. And then jokes management is our header, which is here. And initialize tables is our href, which is essentially a link. And its tag is load. So when we click on this, if you can see down in the bottom left corner, there's a load. When we click on it, it will go to the case load in our control servlet. So if we look at load in our control servlet, it goes to the function load all tables. So we can go down to our function in control servlet, load all tables. So now, if we look at load all tables, it initializes reviews, initializes jokes, and initializes the user DAO. And then it dispatches the request and forwards the request and the response to that page. So when we click on initialize tables, it prints that all tables have been initialized, and it routed to loadalltables.jsp. So if we go to loadalltables.jsp, we can see that there is jokes management application, which is the title, jokes management, and then registration page, and then all tables have been initialized is what it prints. So we can see that it ran that function. So if we go into review.dao.initialize reviews, we can see the first function that we run. So if we go down here, for initialize reviews, we print out start load revs, which as we can see down here, it prints. So we are in this function. And then we say drop table if exists, and then create table if non-exist reviews. And we have a comment, a rating, a joke ID, and a poster ID. And then I assert uniqueness between the poster ID and the joke ID so that the same person can't comment on the same joke twice. So then I create the table and then I insert 10 jokes into the review table. And then I execute that. And then after that is executed, after I've inserted and initialized the table, I print out end load revs. So as we can see down in the console, end load revs. So we went through this entire thing and initialized all of the reviews with no errors. So then the second function, if we look back at the control servlet after review DAO, is joke DAO. So if we go into joke DAO and look at initialize jokes, we start with start load jokes. So as we can see, we went to start load jokes, and then drop table if exists, joke table, and then we have create table if not exists, joke table, and then ID, title, description, date, tags, and post user ID, and then our primary key is the ID. So there can't be more than one joke that shares that ID. And then we create the table by executing that update. And then we make all of these insert into the table, and then these values. So we have 10 different value sets that we're going to insert into the joke table. that has title, description, date, tags, and post user ID. We do not specify ID because it's auto-incrementing, so it determines the ID by itself. MySQL does that. And then after we initialize the table and insert all of them, we insert it and then we say end load jokes. So as we can see down here, end load jokes was printed. So we went through this entire table and initialized everything with no errors. So then if we go back to the control servlet and we look at user.dao.load user, we can go to user DAO and look at the load users function. So load users. So drop table if exists user, create table if not exists. So we're dropping and creating a new table. And we have a user ID, a password, first name, last name, email, gender, age, a ban, which is whether or not they're banned. And then the primary key is the user ID, so there can't be more than one with the same user ID. And then the email must also be unique, so they can't have the same email attached to two different accounts. And then we create the table with the execute update, and then insert into user, which is our table name, all of these categories. And then we just hard code the values in. These are 10 value sets that we're initializing the table with. And then what we are doing here is we are creating 3 foreign keys. So we are saying alter table, joke table, and we are adding a foreign key that references user ID. So the post user ID of joke table, which if we go back to joke DAO and we look at our names or our column names, we have post user ID. So post user ID references user, and then if we look at what user is called, it's user ID. So those two columns will reference each other in those two tables. We also have 2 for reviews. So the foreign key for the joke ID references the ID of joke table, so that the references, like the reviews, will be attached to a certain joke. And then the poster ID of the reviews will be also reference user ID, because a certain user made a certain review. And we execute all of those. So we make 3 new, we alter the tables and make 3 new foreign keys for existing tables. And then we print end load users. So we can tell that we went through that entire function. So start load users, end load users. And then in control servlet, we request dispatcher to load all tables. So if we go back to load all tables, we can see that all tables have been initialized because it ran all 3 functions. And then if we go to registration page, Salwa will take over.
Okay, so for I worked on the registration page and the user login. When Sophia clicked on the registration, it goes to the register. So in load all tables right here, we have a button registration page, and then the tag is register. So register, and our switch statement is right here. It calls the function register user, which is down here. And then register user dispatches to the register user JSP file. So let me open that. And then in here, we've got the register tag and then the login tag. So this is a link to login. And if we look right here, there's the user login. It's a link to the login page. But for now, we'll go over the registration page. Then we'll go to the login page. And then in the control servlet for register user, after we dispatch to the JSP file, we're getting all these parameters. So user ID, password, first name, last name, email, gender, and age. And then in our JSP file, the user ID, password, first name, last name, email, and for gender, where we have a drop-down menu. So if we look right here, you have a drop-down menu for gender. We specified 3 genders, and then there's other. And then I also did some user validation. So I'll go through each of these scenarios. So the first scenario is if the user doesn't enter any, or if any of the values are empty. So if, let's say they enter something for this field, but these fields are empty and they try to register, it prints an error message saying all fields must be filled, so they have to fill all the fields. And then the way this works, so the set attribute, we're setting the attribute incomplete to this string, and it only executes if it goes in the if statement, so if any of the fields are empty. And then in the JSP file, I have it at the end after the table. So if it goes to this tag incomplete, it prints the error message, and then here we just have some styling, so we're printing it in red. And then the other option is if the age is invalid, or actually it's this, if the user ID already exists. So in our table, we have a root user already, and if they try to register with a root user, it's going to tell them the user already exists, please try again. That's the second validation. And then the third validation is for age. So if they enter an age less than 0 or greater than 120, so it's going to print invalid age. And we will test that this works. So, oops. So for age, if they enter like -10, it says invalid age, please try again. And then the last case is if the user does, or if all the fields are fine, so they didn't like enter any invalid fields. So let's test that. Let's say John, or John123, password hello, first name John Smith, John@yahoo.com. Let's say John's a male and he's 21. So if he clicks on register, it takes him to the success login page, and then we can see that it's being dispatched right here. So if the user is registered and everything worked out fine, it goes to the success login page, and then it prints this message. So first, new user inserted. So he's been inserted into the table because we called the insert function in our user DAO file. So if we go to the user DAO file, it called the insert function, and then we use the prepare statement because we're getting the values from the user, and then it inserted it in the function, and it returned the row that was inserted. So it returned a value of true or false depending on whether this was true. And since it did execute, it returned true, and we can see that the new user was inserted. And then we also have the user was registered and logged in, and then it takes it to the success login page, and then the success login case and the switch statement goes to the post login JSP. Post login JSP just has the title, jokes management application, the header, and then just says welcome to the world of jokes. We still didn't finish that, so that'll be for part 2. And then the second part of this is if they want to log in. So if we want to do user login, we also have a tag. So user login takes it to the login JSP page. In the login JSP, in case they messed up and they pressed on login, but they don't actually have an account, they can go back to the new user registration, so they can go back and forth between the two depending on whether they messed up or not. And then our login, the login tag right here goes to validate user login, which is all the way down here. validate user login calls the it dispatches to the login JSP file, and then it gets the user ID and the password. And we also have two kinds of validation here. The first is if the first is if they actually if the user exists and it logs them in successfully. The second, which we'll go through first, is if one of the fields is empty. So if they try to log in with one of the empty fields, it prints an error message, all fields must be filled. And that is using the set attribute again, incomplete. And in our login page, we have two different set attributes, no match, two different variables, no match or incomplete. And then it gets the string only if those statements are executed. And then the second option is if they enter a username and password that don't match. So that doesn't match. But then the last option is if they enter a user ID and password that do match. So then it goes to the user logged in, it prints user logged in, and then it goes to the success login page, which is the same page that it goes to when they register. Because when they register, they're automatically logged in. So right here, if we register with root, it goes to the same page as before. There's a print statement that says user logged in, so the user has been logged in, and then it goes to the success login page. So that's pretty much it for part 1, and we'll be sharing with you our update on part 2 when we're done. Thank you.